Hey guys, today I want to show you my range Pulverize build. I've had a lot of requests to share my updated version of this build, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. This is by far the most fun I've had with a Pulverize build. It has everything most Pulverized builds lack. It has great single target damage, no spirit issues, no downtime, doesn't rely on cooldowns, and has great movement speed and crazy attack speed. So let's get started with the gear and the aspects. On your helm, you will want basic attack speed, lucky hit with a barrier, and total armor. And for the last slot, you'll want either max health, willpower, or cooldown reduction. The reason why we are not prioritizing cooldown reduction is because the only cooldown we use is Petrify, and we only mostly use it in sticky situations and bosses which die in one use anyways. For the aspect, you will use Bulwark's duration is now 6 seconds. This is to increase your survivability, give you longer unstoppable, which is something this build does lack, but is not too big of a problem since we are ranged and can zone melee crowd controllers. For endgame, however, you will want Tempest Roar. We will be constantly using Wind Shear, which will give us a way to constantly apply Vulnerable. Tempest Roar makes this a werewolf ability, allowing us to benefit from the Envenom passive without having to use Poison Creeper. It also turns us into a werewolf every time we use it, which is very beneficial to us since we are using Bestial Rampage. This means we will also get 25 attack speed and 30% increased damage. While the tooltip does say it takes 2.5 seconds to proc, the constant switching between the two forms will both proc and refresh both of these benefits. Next, for the chest slot, we'll be using Insatiable Fury. This will give you +4 to all werebear abilities. Note that the tooltip does say +3, but at upgrade 5 it is actually +4. This will give us a nice boost in damage. But if you feel squishy, you're going to want to put a chest piece on with 4 damage reductions. I recommend damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction against poison enemies, and damage reduction from distance enemies, since this is a ranged build. For gloves, you're going to want +4 ranks to Pulverize, crit chance, attack speed, and lucky hit chance. For the aspect, you will want Pulverize is now an earth skill. This is fundamental to the build. For pants, you're going to want 4 damage reductions. Again, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction against poison enemies, and damage reduction against distance enemies. For the aspect, you're going to want Disobedience. This aspect was nerfed, but it's still our best option for defense. For our boots, you will want Spirit Cost Reduction, movement speed, damage reduction while injured, and willpower. If you are running Tempest Roar, you will want total armor and werewolf form instead of willpower. For the aspect, you are going to run +2 ranks to earth skills while fortified. This is going to buff our Pulverize since it is now an earth skill. Now for our weapon. Our weapon, you'll want vulnerable damage and willpower. These two stats are the biggest damage increase we can get. For the other two stats, you'll want earth skill crit damage or crit damage. But if you can't get those two, I'd recommend damage with core skills, damage to distance enemies, and all stats, which are all great options. For the aspect, you're going to want the Shockwave aspect. This aspect makes our entire build and is the biggest damage increase that we're going to get. Now for our amulet. For our amulet, you're going to want to try to get +3 ranks to Envenom, as this is going to massively increase our damage. Then you're going to want to get Spirit Cost Reduction, damage reduction to distance enemies, and damage reduction while fortified, or total armor and werewolf form if you are running Tempest Roar. Spirit Cost Reduction is important because paired with the spirit reduction on our boots and our node in our Paragon, that reduces our spirit cost up to 30 when shapeshifting, which we'll be doing constantly, will let us have our Wind Shear constantly keep up our Pulverize. For our aspect, I recommend putting Retaliation on your amulet. That will give you 60% increased damage based on the amount of Fortify you'll have, which you should always have max Fortify. The only reason I'm not currently running it on my amulet is because I use this ring for another build. Now for our rings. For our rings, you'll want vulnerable damage, crit chance, lucky hit chance, and max life. For the aspects, you'll want attack speed on crits and increased earth skill crit damage after casting a storm skill. We're constantly going between earth and storm, so we'll have these benefits at all times. The attack speed is a great buff to the DPS overall. Now for the hearts. The first heart we're going to be using is a Vicious Heart. This gives us critical damage, but makes our non-crit damage less. This is very good for our build because we run crit on our hands and both our rings. And we also benefit from our glyph that gives us 20% crit chance every time we shapeshift, which is every single time we pulverize. And we also get more crit damage from our poison creeper, which is another 20%. So we're always critting. The next heart you're going to want is a Wraithful Heart. This is the Barber. After critting, all damage after that crit is absorbed and then blown up. This heart is currently double dipping, so it's very important to get a roll as close as possible to 2 seconds because you don't want your vulnerable damage falling off. If you keep your vulnerable damage throughout the whole time, you'll apply the vulnerable damage when you're hitting them, and then it will get applied again once it blows up for the final damage. For the last heart, you're going to have 2 options. You can run a Brutal Heart for more defense, and you can use this one where 10 to 20% of incoming damage is suppressed, and then it blows up for amplified damage. Or you can run a Devious Heart and use the one where it pulls all enemies to you when you use your ultimate. This makes Petrify much better, and you can absolutely destroy huge packs using it. Now for our Spirit Boons. For our first slot, we'll be taking 10% reduced damage from elites. From our second slot, we'll be picking 2 of them. We'll be picking attack speed and 30% critical strike damage. This crit damage Spirit Boon is now fixed, and it multiplies with our damage buckets. For our third slot, we'll be picking Pack Leader. This will constantly reset our Poison Creeper, which helps us better zone our enemies and keep a distance. For our fourth slot, we'll be taking Masochistic. This is now a lucky hit, and is the reason why we're stacking lucky hit on our hands and our rings and our helmet if we don't have Tempest Roar. This is a pretty good tool for survivability, and I definitely recommend it. Now for our skill tree. For our basic attack, we'll be getting Wind Shear. Wind Shear is great for this build as it lets us stay fully ranged, and it also gives us a constant source of vulnerable damage. In addition, it gives us more movement speed, which is absolutely great in Werebear form. We'll then go and get Pulverize, as well as the damage reduction from it. We'll get Iron Fur for more damage reduction, and Abundance, which is super good for this build as it lets Wind Shear generate more spirit than Pulverize uses, and then Wild Impulses for more damage. We'll then get Bulwark, which is our only source of Unstoppable. We are ranged, so we don't get CC'd a lot, but when we do, this is very helpful. We'll then get Blood Howl with attack speed to further increase our damage. We'll then get Poison Creeper with a crit chance, as this synergizes with the entire build. We'll then pick up Nature's Reach for the increased damage to distance enemies, and this bonus will be doubled because we'll be applying Poison with Poison Creeper, and Poison will slow them because of our Neurotoxin. Then we'll pick up all points in Envenom. When we get +3 ranks on our amulet, this goes up to 60%, which is a massive damage increase. The tooltip does say it's added, but it's actually multiplied still. We'll then get Fortify with critical strikes with Earth skills. This will keep our Fortify up at all times, which synergizes great with our retaliation aspect, letting us benefit from the full amount at all times. We'll then move down and get Quick Shift. Quick Shift gives us 15% increased damage every time we shapeshift, which is every single time we pulverize. We'll grab Petrify and Prime Petrify for the extra second, 1 point in Defiance, 1 point in Natural Disaster, and then we're going to put all 3 points in Circle of Life for more healing because Masochistic was nerfed. We're then going to put the last 3 points into this because we're always going between Earth and Storm skills, so this is actually an 18% increased damage. And then for our key passive, if you have Tempest Roar, I recommend Bestial Rampage for both of them. But without Tempest Roar, you should get Earth Sign Strength, as it will make you a little bit more tanky and you'll have that 30% increased damage at all times. Now for the Paragon board. I got onto my main Druid, who's level 100, so I can show you the full Paragon board. For the first board, we're going to be going with Shapeshifter. Shapeshifter is very important to this build, as we talked about earlier, as it gives 20% crit chance to all our Pulverizes, because we're always shapeshifting. We're then going to go to the Inner Beast board. Inner Beast is very important to the build as well, as this lets us continuously spam Wind Shear into Pulverize without having any spirit issues. For the glyph, we're going to grab Guzzler. I personally love Guzzler because it increases your attack power. I go from 15,000 to 20,000 attack power on my main Druid just from this glyph alone. We're then going to go to the Thunderstruck board and grab the glyph down here where we will put Spirit in for more crit damage. Moving up, we'll be getting the Earthen Devastation board for 30% increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. And for the glyph, we'll be grabbing Earth and Sky. This will give us 10% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, which all enemies should be vulnerable from our wind shear. And this will also amplify the critical strike damage with Earth skills. Then moving on to the left, we'll be getting the Survival Instincts board, where we will get more damage based on the difference of our health. For the glyph, we'll be getting Exploit. This will help apply vulnerable damage, but as well add massive vulnerable damage. Vulnerable damage is in its own damage bucket, so this increases our damage a ton. We'll move down and grab 25% damage while healthy. This will also increase our attack power, and we'll be getting the vulnerable damage and crit damage down here. We're then going to go for the last board, which is the Ancestral Guidance board. This will give us 30% increased damage after spending 75% spirit, which is a nice damage boost. That concludes the build. If you enjoyed the build, please like and subscribe, and until next time.